Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine18 Tarot and Books. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. Welcome. I am here with a VR to the tag Standout Decks 2023. I first saw this tag on Three Girls and their live, in which they each counted down 5 standout decks of 2023. I'll link their live below. And they defined Standout Decks 2023 in different ways. Whether or not this included only decks acquired in the past year, or whether this was including just decks that were used the most in the given year. So I enjoyed listening to and seeing their top decks. I also watched Julie at Peekaboo Rose go on to T at Cosmic Creepers channel and do a live on this topic. I'll link them below as well. I really like December and January on TarotTube, I will say. I really enjoy both making and watching content that folks produce around this time of year that relates to looking back at what they've really loved the past year, what they've learned the past year, favorites, memories, all of these kinds of things, as well as the kind of looking forward, kinds of content. Card of the Year 2024, um, learning goals in tarot 2024, book reading plans 2024, all of those kinds of things I really like watching a ton of, and I also really like filming. So this will probably be the first of several videos on my channel in the next, few weeks that in various ways look back at 2023 and or look forward to 2024. Now, if you watch my channel, you know that I cannot pick a top 5 ever. I'm quite challenged when it comes to limiting myself, I think, in this respect. I tend to have lots of caveats and lots of kind of honorable mentions and sometimes just say fuck it and include as many things as I want. But for this, I decided to just do it. Do 5 standout decks of 2023. And so I have 5 decks and it's a mix of tarot and oracle. And for me, for standout decks 2023, I limited myself to decks that I both purchased, or in one case was gifted, and acquired in 2023. So I have not included decks, for example, that I backed on Kickstarter in 2022 that arrived in 2023. I have not included things that I think are standout decks that I backed on Kickstarter this year but don't have yet. This is all decks that I both, chose to add to my collection and received and worked with exclusively in 2023. This is partly how I got down to 5 because this helped to rule some things out. So this is 5. This is also the 5 that just immediately kind of came to mind as standout decks of 2023 for me. So I will kind of timestamp below without saying what those 5 decks are. I'll give them each a little description. You'll probably be able to guess a number of them just from that. Of the 5, 4 of them were produced and released in 2023, and one of them was not. So without further ado, Standout Decks 2023. The first one that I will talk about, and these are in no particular order, it's not like a countdown to number 1 or anything, it's just Tarot then Oracle, I guess. The first one that I want to talk about as a standout deck for 2023 is not a deck that was released in 2023, but it is one that I got my copy of this past year, and that is the Lubanco Tarot by E. Lubanco. This deck is out of print, and it has been out of print for some time, and I missed it. And I had, accepted and resigned myself to the fact that I missed it, and then some copies came available that were kind of leftover copies, I guess, that hadn't been sold. And I managed to get one. And I am so glad that I did. I have used this deck a ton in 2023. I have, featured this deck in a few different videos already, in some of my Pride Month content in particular. And I'm just blown away by this deck. I like so much about it. I like the art style. I like the overall kind of vibe of this deck. I like the particular kind of queerness of this deck. Um, oh, I got a catalyst reading for looking ahead to 2024 from my friend Avery Fawcett, and this was the card that came up in that reading, or one of the cards that came up in that reading that Avery gave me. This Lover's card. I love it, and I'm challenged by it in good ways, and I'm prompted to think by it in good ways. I really like this deck. And I never thought I would get a copy. I'm not one to spend a lot of money on, very expensive out of print decks. I'm not in any of the Facebook buy and sell groups because I'm not on Facebook. So like picking up out of print decks like this is not something that comes along very often, and so it felt really special. And I think it was in my birthday month even that these came available. And this deck is such an interesting mix of some depictions that are quite traditional, even, and others that are very unconventional. So it's an interesting deck to work with in that way. I'm experiencing it as wintry, so this is actually what's on my table right now for my daily draws. I'm really enjoying this deck. So that is a standout deck for 2023 for me, Le Banco Tarot. The next standout deck of 2023 is also one that I missed when it was on sale and then was very kindly gifted by a wonderful tarot tuber that I'm very appreciative for that. And that is Tarot of the Crystal World by Brooke Penrose. This is an interesting one. I don't even know how to articulate why exactly it is that I like this deck so much. And it has a little oracle deck that goes with it, and I have them both shoved in the box here. So bear with a second. Okay. This deck is not like anything else in my collection style-wise. It is colorful. It's a little bit comic-like. It definitely reads queer to me. It has a kind of Western. It has a kind of Western flavor to it. It definitely has um, a fair amount of kind of pop cultural references built into it, but then some cards, are quite, like this one, quite Smithwaite traditional, others are not. Again, um, very unique deck. I love everything about the production of this deck. I love the cardstock of this deck. I like the box. I like the oracle that it came with. I think that this deck is just fantastic. And, it's one that I just seeing it online and seeing people work with it and seeing people make videos about it, I was like, there's something about this. There's something about this that is just so intriguing to me that I really like the kind of attitude of this deck. For lack of a better way of explaining. I think there are some really interesting depictions in this deck, and I'm so glad that I get to have a copy of it because I've used it so much since this deck arrived to me. When this arrived, I pretty much put everything else away on the shelf and it was a good 6 weeks of just using this. And I think that this will be the Lubanko will as well for sure. I think that this will be another kind of deep dive video deck feature because I think that there's a lot to dig into in this deck, but then it also somehow reads really well right out of the box. Like there's a lot to get into, but it's also it's not the kind of deck that requires a ton of intensive study to read. It's not a deck that needs, that you need to go to the pamphlet that came with it to comprehend the reading. It's very clear. I did do a deck interview with this deck. I don't always. Maybe I'll kind of recreate that for the deep dive video and talk through it, because it definitely kind of communicated being a deck that is amenable to particular kinds of work that I feel like I need to be doing right now, that I am doing right now. And I think this deck is really special. I think this deck is really, really special. And I'm definitely watching Brooke Penrose to see, you know, future projects, because this is really cool and really well done. And definitely a standout deck of 2023 for me, the Crystal World. Next up, the last tarot in the bunch, actually. Standout deck of 2023 for me that came quite recently, which is Marseille Prendre Vie by Krista of Antiques Tarot. This one, I've had it for longer because I did have a review copy, as I've shared on the channel, of course. This deck just makes me happy. And I have spent time studying Marseille before, working through a couple of Marseille books, but I have had a hard time because I have found it difficult to find Marseille decks that I like, to be quite blunt. Like Pip decks, no problem. I have Pip decks in my collection, or Pip-ish decks in my collection that I love reading with, that are some of my favorite decks to read with, but really traditional Marseille is a challenge. And in some ways, the few that I've had in my collection are not necessarily the most amenable to being used to learn, because like something like Le Terre Noir, for example, is so large that, it's a cool deck and I really like the style and the art, but, to learn kind of Marseille tarot reading techniques with it is a challenge because of the large cards. Like I can fit 3 on my table and that's about it. Maybe 6 if I really push it. So having a Marseille deck that makes me want to actually read Marseille is really nice. And I also got the Diverse Tarot de Marseille, which is on Make Playing Cards this year. And so there's me cheating on the 5 and bringing in an honorable mention. I feel like between these two and the Gay Marseille made by Charlie Claire Burgess that's going to come out next year, 2024 might be a Marseille year for me again. I think I might try to revisit Marseille study, because now, because of decks like this one, I feel like I might actually enjoy myself. So, watching this come to life was really fun, and seeing things get adjusted and tweaked, and it of course incorporates landscape photography, which is a favorite thing of mine in decks. A lot of my favorite decks include landscape photography in some way. So having that as well, just there's a lot in this deck that I really, really like. And it's very contemporary, it's very relatable. There's 1 or 2 photos in here that are places that I've actually been, so that's kind of fun. There's a lot that look like places I've been. The people are very relatable, very current, but it's also, very traditional in terms of people's postures and the directions that they're facing and what they're doing and so on, and the kind of design elements. So with a kind of traditional kind of Marseille textbook or something like that, like this would actually work perfectly well. And so that makes it really stand out for me. I think it's really effective. I think it's really well done. And I think that because of it, and because of its mini, there's a mini one too. Now I'm again cheating on the 5 only. I'm going to, I think, be doing a lot more with Marseille in 2024. And so if a deck can kind of bring me back to an entire system or like lineage of cards, I think that that's pretty amazing, and that's definitely standout deck of 2023. So that's the tarot. For Oracle decks, standout 2023, I chose the first one that came to mind no question, is Nellie's Deck by Kelly Fitzgerald of The Truth and Story. This deck is a combination of tarot, Lenormand, which I'm not very well versed in, but maybe that will change, playing cards, Oracle, and it's really its own system, but it's its own system that's very rooted in quite traditional takes on several other systems, if that makes sense. And I think that this is just such a cool project. I think it's such an accomplishment. I think that it is fantastically well thought out. It is a beautiful kind of thing to hold and to work with, and all of the kind of details, the kind of antique fabric that the bag was made out of, and all the work that went into the guidebook. Like this to me as a project, like as an overall, like not just the deck, but the book and the kind of putting together of everything, the backstory of this deck, it really just kind of eclipses everything else this year for me. It's it's brilliant. And I want to spend a lot of time with this in 2024, which means it's a standout 2023. And I've spent a lot of time with this because I took the class with Kelly about the Nellie's deck before I even had a copy of it. So now I have to go back and rewatch the recordings because when you take a class with Kelly, you get like there's a live Zoom, but then you get to keep the recordings for afterwards. I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch it because now I have my copy. Some people like made their own copies during. I was like, this is not. That's Kelly's dog. Um, this is not a thing I'm going to do. I'm just going to wait for the real thing. And I'm so excited by this deck. I'm so excited by this deck. I cannot wait. Well, I'm not waiting because I've already been working with it, but I feel like there'll be a bit of a study project and exploration project and deep dive of this in 2024 as well. So Nellie's deck is without a doubt standout deck 2023. Last but not least, I chose Sacred Incantations, Rituals of Trans Wisdom for every season, and this is a collaborative, collectively produced deck, Oracle deck, and the book that it comes with, I've shown this, I have a video about this on my channel already, but for those who did not see it, the book that it came with, which is quite large, comes with a ritual for each of the cards. And so for each ritual, it tells you, the amount of time needed for it, the items, the context, and then walks you through the kind of activity. So this is really good. There is a larger, like a physically larger copy of this with larger font, and I think I may actually order that because I'm worried about the binding. I feel like I'm going to be using it a lot, and I'm worried about the binding on that book being so small. So this is a trans deck. It is organized into 4 suits: germinating, rooting, blooming, and decaying, which are color coded. And this was a very impulsive. I'm not much of an impulsive deck backer or purchaser most of the time, but this was like a no-brainer for me. Like, of course, I'm gonna want to work with this. I have cried over this deck already. Um, I I did not know how much this deck would affect me. There's nothing like it in my mind. Like there's nothing like this. I am not somebody who tends towards like affirmation decks as a rule, but this one feels good to work with. And something that I've been doing with this deck um, is combining it with my moon phase reading practice. So when I am thinking about, an intention to set at new moon time, and I'll put out a card with a new moon on it, on my reading table. And I will pick a card from here that kind of speaks to or connects to in some way that intention, and then I will leave it out throughout the cycle as a kind of thing to look at and check in with throughout. I've picked cards from this deck face up just based on what I kind of needed at the time. I've, you know, picked a card of the day. These are too much for a card of the day though. But I've shuffled and chosen a card as well. And yeah, I just think this deck is really special. I have had a very emotional reaction to it. Some of that is the time, and the kind of broader life context that kind of I'm in right now that I think affects that as well. But this is a really special project. I'm really glad that it exists. I'm grateful to the all of the people who worked on this. Is a huge project, a huge number of people across, you know, a number of continents and countries all worked on this, and I think that it's really something incredible. So that's my standout decks for 2023. Lubanco Tarot, Tarot of the Crystal World, Marseille Plantovie, Nelly's deck, and Sacred Incantations. I I did it. I picked 5 standout decks of 2023. If you have any of these decks, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. I would also love you to share a VR of your own of your standout decks of 2023, or you can always put them in the comments below. If you're not someone who makes videos, I would love to hear what decks have been standout decks for you this year. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.